it is generally a wrong guide. Our enemy, savagely striking at will across all of South Vietnam, has finally shattered the mask of official illusion with which we have concealed our true circumstances, even from ourselves. Only a short time ago, we were serene in our reports and our predictions of progress. In April, our commitments are now over. The enemy has been so badly pummeled, he said, he'll never give us trouble again. In December, we were told that we were winning battle after battle. And in January, just last month, we were told, and I quote, that the secure proportion of the population has grown from about 45% to 65%. And in the contested areas, the tide continues to run with us. That is what we were told, and we were told so at the highest possible level. I believe those dreams are gone. The Viet Cong will probably withdraw from the cities as they were forced to withdraw from the American embassy. Thousands of them will be dead, but they will nevertheless have demonstrated that no part or person of South Vietnam is secure from their attacks, neither district capitals nor American bases, neither the peasant in his rice paddy, nor our ambassador, nor the commanding general of our own great forces. No one can predict the exact. You must let your mind be bold. We will find no guide, the future of Vietnam, unless we are bold enough to strip away the deceptive illusions and to confront the grim anguish, the reality of the battlefield, which was once a nation called South Vietnam. It is, it seems to me, a time for truth. We are told that the enemy suffered terrible losses, and there is no doubt that he did. They cannot, however, be as devastating as the figures appear. The Secretary of Defense has told us, and I quote, that during all of 1967, the communists lost about 165,000 effectives, yet enemy main force strength has been maintained at a relatively constant level of about 110,000 to 115,000 during the past year, according to the Secretary of Defense. Thus it would seem that no matter how many Viet Cong and North Vietnamese we claim to kill, through some miraculous effort of will, enemy strength remains the same. Now our intelligence chief tells us that of 60,000 men thrown into the attacks on the cities in the last 2 weeks, more than 20,000 have been killed. If only 2 men have been seriously wounded for every one dead, a very conservative estimate, the entire enemy force has thus been put out of action. Then I ask, who is now doing the fighting? Again, it is claimed that the communists expected a large-scale popular uprising, which did not occur. How ironic it is that we here in the United States and our public officials should claim a victory because a people to whom we have given 16,000 lives, billions of dollars, and almost a decade to defend did not rise up in arms against us. More disillusioning and painful is the fact the population did not rise to defend their freedom against the Viet Cong. Thousands of men in arms were infiltrated into popular urban areas over a period of days, if not of weeks. Yet few, if any, citizens rushed to inform their protectors of this massive infiltration. At best, they simply shut their doors to concern, waiting for others to resolve the issue. Did we know the attack was coming? If so, why did we not strike first? And where were the forces needed for an effective defense? For years we have been told that the measure of our success and our progress in Vietnam was increasing security and control over the population. Now we have seen that none of the population is secure and that no area is under sure control. 4 years ago, when we only had about 30,000 troops in Vietnam, the Viet Cong were unable to mount assaults in the cities. They have now conducted the kinds of assaults that they have now conducted against our forces. At one time, a suggestion was made that we protect the enclaves, and that was derided. Now there are no protected enclaves. This has not happened because our men are not brave or effective, because they are. It is because we have not conceived our mission in this war. We've misconceived the nature of the war. It is because we have sought to resolve by military might a conflict whose issue depends upon the will and the conviction of the South Vietnamese people. It is like sending a lion in to halt an epidemic of jungle rot. This misconception really rests on a second illusion, the illusion that we can win a war which the South Vietnamese cannot win for themselves. And while 19-year-old American boys fight to maintain this Senate and this Assembly in Saigon, every detached observer has testified to the enormous corruption which pervades every level of South Vietnamese political life. Hundreds of millions of dollars are stolen by private individuals. Last year, after all of our talk and our pressure of reform, 2 high Army officials were finally dismissed for what was described as criminal corruption. It was applauded here in the United States. Last month, these same 2 officers were given new and powerful commands. In the meantime, incorruptible officers resign out of frustration and out of despair. Perhaps we could live with corruption, and perhaps we could live with inefficiency by themselves. However, the consequence is not simply the loss of money or popular confidence. It is, in fact, the loss of American lives. For government corruption is a source of the enemy's strength. It is more than anything else the reason why the greatest power on earth cannot defeat a tiny and a primitive foe. You cannot expect people to risk their lives and endure hardship unless they have a stake in their own society. They must have a clear sense of identification with their own government, a belief that they are participating. Last week, more than any election, more than any proud boast, that simple fact reveals the truth. The unswerving pursuit of military victory, whatever its cost, is in the interests of either ourselves or of the people of Vietnam. For the people of Vietnam, the last 3 years have meant little but terrible, terrible horror. Their tiny land has been devastated by a weight of bombs, and 2 presidents and countless officials have told us for 7 years that although we can help the South Vietnamese, it is their war and they must win it. As Secretary of Defense McNamara told us last month, we cannot provide the South Vietnamese with the will to survive as an independent nation or with the ability and self-discipline a people must have to govern themselves. These qualities and attributes, he said, are essential contributions to the struggle that only the South Vietnamese themselves can supply. Yet this wise and this certain counsel has gradually become an empty slogan, as mounting frustration has led us to transform the war into an American military effort. The South Vietnamese Senate, with only 1 dissenting voice, refuses to draft 18 and 19-year-old South Vietnamese, with a member of their assembly asking, why should Vietnamese boys be sent to die for Americans? We have, in fact, in Vietnam, an ally in name only. We support a government without supporters. Without the efforts of American arms, the government in Saigon would not last a day. More in sorrow than in anger, what has happened to America? I believe we asked the same question of ourselves that morning, and the fact is that we do not have a satisfactory answer. The 4th illusion is that the American national interest is identical with, or should be subordinated to, the selfish interest of an incompetent military regime. We are told, of course, that the battle for South Vietnam is in reality a struggle for 250 million Asians, the beginning of a great society for all of Asia. But this, in fact, is pretension. We can and we should offer reasonable assistance in Asia, but we cannot build a great society there if we cannot build one in our own country. We cannot speak extravagantly of a struggle for 250 million Asians when a struggle for 15 million in one Asian country so strains our forces that another Asian country, a fourth-rate power which we have already once defeated in battle, dares to seize an American ship and hold and humiliate its crew. And we are told that the war in Vietnam will settle the whole course of the future of Asia. But that is a prayerful wish, based in fact on unsound hope, meant only to justify the enormous sacrifices that we have already made. The truth is that decades of further draining conflict on the mainland of Asia, conflict which, as our finest military leaders have already warned, could lead us only to a national tragedy. There is an American interest in South Vietnam. We have an interest in maintaining the strength of our commitments, and surely we have demonstrated that. With all of the lives and the resources that we have poured into Vietnam, is there anyone to argue that a government with any support of its people, with any competence to rule, with any determination to defend itself, would not long have been victorious against any insurgent movement, however assisted from outside its borders? And we have another more immediate interest, to protect the lives of our gallant young men and to conserve American resources. But we do not have an interest in the survival of a privileged class, growing ever more wealthy from the corruption of the war, which after all our sacrifice in their behalf can ask why Vietnamese boys have to fight for Americans. The fifth illusion is that this war can be settled in our own way and in our own time and on our own terms. Such a settlement is the privilege of the triumphant, of those who crush their enemies in battle or wear away their will to fight. And ladies and gentlemen, we simply have not done this, nor is there any prospect that we will achieve such a victory. It is time to discard so proven a fallacy and face the reality that a military victory is not in sight and that it will probably never come. Unable to defeat our enemy or to break his will, at least without a huge, long, and even more costly effort, we must actively seek a peaceful settlement. We can no longer harden our terms every time Hanoi indicates that it might be prepared to negotiate, and we must be willing to foresee a settlement which will give the Viet Cong and the National Liberation Front a chance to participate in the political life of their country. Not perhaps because we want them to, not because that's the way that we wished it would end, but because that is the only way in which the struggle can be settled. No one knows if negotiations will bring such a peaceful settlement, but we do know that there will be no peaceful settlement without such negotiations. Nor can we have these negotiations just on our own terms. Again, we might like that. We might rather have that. But we're simply not going to be able to accomplish it. And what I'm saying today is that we have to face the facts as they are. We may have to make concessions. We may have to take risks. And surely we will have to negotiate directly with the National Liberation Front as well as Hanoi. And surely it is only another illusion that still denies this basic necessity. What we must not do is confuse the prestige staked on a particular policy with the interest of the United States. Nor should we be unwilling to take risks for peace when we are so willing to take risk so many lives in the war that is taking place there. A year ago, when our adversary offered negotiations, if only we would halt the bombing of the North, we replied with a demand for his unconditional surrender. Officials at the highest level of our government felt that we were on the edge of a military victory, and negotiations, except on our own terms, were not necessary. So therefore, we made that demand in February of 1967 that they had to surrender, in fact surrender, before we would go to the negotiating table with them. Now, a year too late, we have set far less conditions for a bombing halt, conditions which clearly would have been more acceptable at that time. And in the intervening year, for all of its terrible costs, the deaths of thousands of Americans and South Vietnamese has not improved our condition one single bit. When the chance for negotiation comes again, Let us not postpone it for another year, and let us understand and have recognition of what is really possible and necessary for a peaceful settlement. These are some of the illusions which, it seems to me, must be discarded if the events of last week are to prove not simply a tragedy, but a lesson which carries with it some basic truths. First, that the progress that we have claimed toward increasing control over the country and the security of the population is largely illusory. Fourth, that the central battle in this war cannot be measured by body counts or by bomb damage, but by the extent to which the people of South Vietnam act on a sense of common purpose and hope with those who govern them. Fifth, that the current regime in Saigon is incapable of being or unwilling to be an effective ally in the war against the communists. Sixth, that a political compromise is not just the best path to peace, but the only path. And we must show as much willingness to risk some of our prestige for peace as to risk the lives of our young men in war. Seventh, that the escalation policy in Vietnam, far from strengthening and consolidating international resistance to aggression, is injuring our country throughout the world, reducing the faith of other peoples in our wisdom and in our purpose, and weakening the world's resolve to stand together for freedom and for peace. Eighth, under fire, or the bravery to make sacrifices, but the bravery to discard the comfort of illusion, to do away with false hopes and alluring promises. Reality is grim, and reality is painful. And this kind of a speech is painful to give, and I'm sure painful to listen to. But it is only a remote echo of the anguish and the further horror toward which a policy founded on illusion is surely taking us. This is a great nation, and this is a strong people. Any who seek to comfort rather than to speak plainly, reassure rather than to instruct, promise satisfaction rather than to reveal frustration, they deny the strength of this country, and they deny its greatness. For today, as it was at the beginning, it is the truth that makes us free. Thank you very much.